Hey guys, so I have another thrift store painting for you. And I don't mean to brag, but I recently just went to Painting with a Twist. And so basically, I feel like I'm a professional now. So watch me paint. I think you're going to enjoy it. Instead of playing music, this time I'm going to be reading some scary stories. Okay, so this first one is called Who's in My Bed? A father went to say goodnight to his 7-year-old son, very well knowing that if he didn't, his son would have trouble sleeping. It was a nightly routine between them. He entered the dimly lit room where his son waited under his blanket. With the first glance, the father could tell there was something unusual about his son tonight, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He looked the same, but had a grin that drew from ear to ear. "You okay, buddy?" the father asked. The son nodded, still with the grin, before saying, "Daddy, check for monsters under my bed." The father chuckled a bit before getting on his knees to check only to satisfy his son. There under the bed, pale and afraid, was his son. His real son. He whispered, "Daddy, there's someone in my bed." That one was really short, and it was also very goosebumpsy. But let me try a different one. This one's going to be called The Cabin. A hiker decided to go on a hike by himself, something he was not very used to. The whole day was normal. Trees and bushes engulfed his surroundings. He enjoyed being outdoors in the mountains. Nothing seemed strange to him. That was until he was making his way back to his car. He figured an 8-hour hike was good enough. The sky was already getting dark, and he needed to get back fast. What was odd was how much he didn't recognize the trail back. He began to panic. Night had already taken over, and all he had was a flashlight and no clue on how to get back. He knew it was already too late and too dangerous to keep going through the perilous forest. I don't know what that means. He began to worry that he would have no shelter for the night when, almost luckily enough, he stumbled across a broken down cabin. Nothing could go wrong here, right? It was dark, and it seemed like no one had visited it in years. But he knew it was the only place where he could rest until daylight, especially since his flashlight was running out of battery. He knocked on the door a few times, but no one answered. So he let himself in, where, strangely enough, a perfect bed fitted for one person awaited him in the center. He knew that if the owner came back, he could explain himself. He was sure that the owner wouldn't mind, or was even probably dead. So he went ahead and got himself comfortable in bed. As he tried to sleep, he couldn't ignore the collection of paintings around the room. Portraits of strange-looking people all peering at him, each wearing a smile that sent chills up his spine. Not too long after his exhaustion from the hike got the best of him and he was able to ignore the faces. The next morning, he got up early and was shocked to see there were no paintings around the room, but windows. Isn't that so creepy? Anyways, moving on. The next story is going to be called The Red Wristband. A doctor was working at a hospital where the patients were tagged with colored bands: green, alive, red, deceased. One night, the doctor was instructed to get a few supplies from the basement of the hospital. And so he headed to the lift. The lift doors opened, and there was a patient inside, minding her own business. Patients were allowed to roam around the hospital to stretch, especially those who had stayed long. The rule was to be back in their rooms before 10. The doctor smiled at the patient before pressing the number for the basement. He found it unusual that the woman didn't have a button already pressed. He wondered if she was heading to the basement too. The lift finally reached the floor where the doors opened. In the distance, a man was limping towards the elevator. and in a panic, the doctor slammed the elevator button to close. It finally did, and the lift began to ascend back up, the doctor's heart pounding. "Why did you do that? He was trying to use the lift," the woman stated, annoyed. "Did you see his wrist?" the doctor asked. "It was red. He died last night. I would know because I did his surgery." The woman lifted her wrist. He saw red. She smiled. "Like this one?" This is kind of fun. I should probably quit my day job and just read ghost stories. Just kidding. But really, if you're enjoying this, definitely make a comment below so that I'll know and I can keep doing this. Okay, this next one is called The Clown Statue. A young teen is babysitting for a family that is very, very wealthy in a large mansion filled with a huge number of rooms and a vast number of interesting antiques and artifacts. Strangely, though, the father mentions to the girl that once the children are put to sleep for the night, the girl should only go to the basement and not spend her time in any other room of the house. She could watch television down there and was free to do anything else in the basement, but the rest of the house was off limits. She goes to the basement once the children are in bed, but quickly notices a large clown statue in the corner of the room. It appears to be staring at her. She continues to watch her show, but can't shake the feeling that the statue is following her around the room with its eyes. She puts a blanket over the statue, eventually in an effort to make herself feel more comfortable. And then telephones the father of the children to ask if she can go and move to another room of the house because she's so freaked out about this clown. "You need to leave now. We don't own a clown statue. The children have been telling us they've been seeing a clown in their room in the night, and we thought they were having nightmares. Take the children and get out." The young girl hangs up the phone, terrified. She turns around and the statue is gone, leaving behind only the blanket on the floor. I kind of think maybe that one was for kids, so I don't know how scary that one was, but maybe this next one will be scarier. So it's called The Hitchhiker That Never Was. It's a promising title. A girl in a pretty white dress and embroidered sweater flags down an old man for a ride. He gives her a ride to her great-grandmother's house, and they have a lovely conversation talking about the old days. The elderly man shares some great stories with her. He drops her off at her Gima's house. I think that's supposed to say grandma's house. And he goes home. The following day, he gets into his car to pick up some milk and the paper. He realizes the sweater is still in his car. He swings by the young girl's Gima's, maybe that's a word, I don't know, Gima's house to drop off the sweater, and her Gima answers the door. He explains why he's there. "I'm sorry, sir. I think you have the wrong address. My great-granddaughter died many, many years ago, wearing her favorite white dress, after a night out dancing." Ooh, it's scary. Okay, we're going to read one more. Hopefully this will be scarier than the last couple that we've had. This one's called The Ghostly Maid. Once upon a time, a man and a boy who had lost their wife and mother moved into a new house. They were told by the locals in the village that the house was haunted, but neither the man nor the boy believed in ghosts, and they moved into the house quite happily. The child went downstairs and asked the maid of the home for a glass of water and some fruit, and she happily obliged. She also told the boy that there could be ghosts. Later that day, the boy struck up a conversation with his father. "Daddy, I've been thinking. I could believe in ghosts. The maid told me there might be ghosts in the house." "Son, we don't have a maid. We need to leave." I'm starting to think that a lot of these stories are written by the same people. I am seeing a pattern here. Okay, I lied earlier. This is going to be the last story. It's called Mr. Sullivan. On a cold winter day, Mr. Sullivan came to whilst walking alongside the edge of a road. He walked over to a woman and asked her for some help, only for her to scream loudly at the mere sight of him and run away in fear. Astonished at her response, Mr. Sullivan continued on his way and tried to flag down several passing cars, only for them all to speed up as soon as they saw him. He eventually called a taxi company, and when they arrived, they looked at him and they too sped away. The man went back to the same phone booth. The man went back to the same phone booth and called his wife, wanting to know what on earth was going on and why people seemed to be so afraid of him. A man answered the phone in a voice he didn't recognize. Unfortunately, Miss Sullivan isn't available at the moment. She's at her husband's funeral. He died in a car accident last night. Finally, Mr. Sullivan found his way to a public bathroom. He looked at the mirror and found his face bloodied and bruised, his skin a mess and his bones broken. His skin was pale and his eyes bloodied. He realized why everyone was so reluctant to stop for him. He was dead. He was a ghost. Okay, so I don't really know how I feel about those stories. Maybe next time I'll read from a Goosebumps book. I'm not really sure. So comment below if you have any ideas. Thanks for watching.